Imagine being admired by everyone around you, considered the most handsome, the most charismatic. Now imagine using all that power not for good, but for destruction. Absalom, the most handsome man in the Bible, wasn't just a symbol of beauty. He was a symbol of tragedy. Think beauty and success guarantee a flawless life. Think again. Absalom, with everything going for him, chose the darkest path. He turned against his own father, the great King David, and here's the most shocking part. What drove him to commit such disgusting actions? If you think you know how this story ends, get ready to be surprised. Stick with me because in the next few minutes, we're going to reveal the truth behind how vanity, unchecked ambition, and deep family wounds can drive even the most admired person to ruin, and you'll discover something crucial that might just change the way you look at your own choices. Absalom, the son of King David, was known for his striking appearance, a quality that set him apart from everyone else in the Bible. His physical beauty was unmatched, making him the most handsome man in the Bible. From the tips of his long hair to his flawless skin, people couldn't help but marvel at him. It's hard to imagine someone like Absalom, who was admired by many, being caught up in such tragic events. But despite his beauty, his story was filled with complexities that went far beyond appearances. It's fascinating how Absalom's looks became almost symbolic of his influence. His charm and physical attributes opened doors that might not have been possible otherwise. Think about how, in today's world, someone with charisma and good looks often garners attention, whether in social circles or leadership roles. But, as we know, having such qualities doesn't necessarily guarantee wisdom or sound judgment. Absalom's life demonstrates how someone who seems to have it all can still struggle with internal conflicts. Even though Absalom was the most handsome man in the Bible, his character was shaped by more than just his looks. His family dynamics played a significant role in molding the man he became. Born to King David and Maacah, he wasn't just a handsome face but carried the lineage of both Israelite and foreign royalty. This dual heritage added to his allure and stature in the kingdom. But as many families experience, having status and power doesn't protect one from internal strife. In Absalom's case, being part of David's family meant navigating a tangled web of relationships and tensions. It's like any family today, where the expectations and roles people play can create conflicts. Absalom's beauty may have placed him in the public eye, but it also placed a target on his back. People expected more from him, and when tensions rose within the family, his reactions were scrutinized more harshly than others. This burden, combined with his ambition, set the stage for future rebellion. People admired him, not just for his physical beauty but for the aura of leadership he exuded. It's common to see individuals who, by appearance alone, command respect, and Absalom was one of those people. Imagine being someone who everyone looks up to, someone whose every word is taken seriously, purely based on appearance. However, as we'll see later, this attention came at a price. His physical attributes may have brought admiration, but they also fueled his own sense of entitlement and ambition. Absalom's story becomes even more intriguing when you think about the expectations that came with being King David's son. Much like today's public figures, people placed him on a pedestal. However, living in someone's shadow, especially a king, is never easy. Absalom's good looks and royal bloodline only increased the pressure. He was seen as the ideal successor in many ways, but this perception clashed with the realities of his inner struggles. When people think of Absalom, they often focus on his beauty. But beauty can be deceiving, and in Absalom's case, it masked deeper issues. Like many in positions of power or privilege, his good looks were a double-edged sword. On one hand, they gave him influence and admiration, but on the other, they overshadowed his true intentions and flaws. It's easy to see how the most handsome man in the Bible could become trapped in his own image. Absalom's physical beauty often led people to forget that he, too, was human. He had the same struggles, ambitions, and emotions as anyone else. In a way, his beauty served as both his greatest asset and his downfall. Think about modern celebrities who are idolized for their looks but often struggle with the pressures that come with fame. Absalom lived in a similar world, where his appearance was praised, but his internal battles were overlooked. Despite his outward charm, Absalom's actions reveal a man who was deeply conflicted. His story shows that beauty isn't everything, especially when it comes to leadership and family dynamics. Absalom may have been the most handsome man in the Bible, But his beauty didn't save him from making poor decisions. In fact, it might have even contributed to his sense of invincibility. There's a lesson in how his good looks didn't protect him from the challenges that came his way. It's interesting to think about how someone like Absalom, with so much going for him, could end up rebelling against his father, King David. His appearance might have set high expectations, but it also made him believe he could challenge authority. This is where Absalom's story takes a darker turn. It's a reminder that beauty can sometimes cloud one's judgment, leading to decisions driven by ego rather than wisdom. And in Absalom's case, his looks may have made him believe he was invincible, even though he was admired for his beauty. Absalom's life wasn't without complications. Like anyone else, he had personal battles to fight, and those battles often played out in the public eye. People tend to focus on the external, but Absalom's story reveals that inner struggles are often more significant than what's seen on the surface. His beauty made him stand out, but it didn't shield him from the consequences of his actions. As we delve deeper into Absalom's life, it becomes clear that his beauty wasn't enough to protect him from the trials he would face. It's easy to get caught up in appearances, but as his story unfolds, we see that good looks aren't everything. Absalom's charm and appearance may have made him popular, but popularity doesn't always lead to success. His rebellion against King David is a prime example of how outward beauty can sometimes lead to misguided decisions. Absalom's rebellion didn't stem from his appearance, but his beauty certainly played a part in how others perceived him. His good looks gave him influence, but it also led to pride and arrogance. Just like today, when we see those who seem to have it all making poor choices, Absalom's beauty couldn't save him from his fate. It's a powerful reminder that external qualities don't always reflect internal strength. Looking at Absalom's story, it's clear that he had the potential to be much more than just the most handsome man in the Bible. His physical beauty opened doors, but his internal struggles held him back. There's a lesson here for anyone who thinks that appearances are everything. Absalom's life teaches us that beauty, while admirable, can never replace character and wisdom. His tragic story shows that, in the end, it's what's inside that truly counts. One could argue that Absalom's beauty was his downfall. He relied too much on his appearance and charisma to get what he wanted, instead of relying on wisdom and humility. His story is a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can navigate life purely based on looks. Like Absalom, many have fallen into the trap of believing that beauty equals success, only to find themselves facing consequences they never expected. And so, Absalom's journey, marked by his unmatched beauty, serves as a reminder of the fleeting nature of appearances. It's easy to admire someone for their looks, but as his story progresses, we'll see how much more there is to life than being the most handsome man in the Bible. The next chapter of Absalom's life will show us how his family dynamics, particularly his relationship with his siblings, shaped his future decisions. Absalom's family was far from simple. As the son of King David, Absalom was part of one of the most famous families in the Bible, but it was also one filled with tension and conflict. Born to Maacah, the daughter of a foreign king, Absalom had a noble lineage that extended beyond Israel. This made his position within the family even more complex. While his beauty may have drawn admiration, it didn't shield him from the internal battles he would face at home. Growing up in King David's household, Absalom was one of many children, each with their own ambitions and personalities. His relationship with his siblings, especially Amnon, was particularly strained. It's not uncommon for families to experience sibling rivalry, but in Absalom's case, the tensions ran deep. As the most handsome man in the Bible, he naturally stood out, which may have only intensified the conflicts with his brothers. When beauty and ambition collide, the results can be catastrophic. Absalom's noble heritage was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it gave him status and recognition, but on the other, it created expectations that were difficult to live up to. His family dynamics reflected the challenges of navigating multiple identities, both as a son of Israel and as a grandson of a foreign king. In many ways, Absalom's story mirrors the struggles of people today who balance cultural expectations and familial pressures. It's a reminder that no matter how perfect someone may appear on the outside, their internal world can be far more complicated. David's household wasn't just any family, it was the royal family, which meant that every action and decision was magnified. Imagine living in a household where every mistake or disagreement is public knowledge, where even the smallest issues can escalate into major conflicts. For Absalom, this meant that his beauty and status couldn't protect him from the scrutiny that came with being part of David's lineage. Just like today, where public figures are constantly under the spotlight, Absalom had no escape from the eyes of the kingdom. The tension between Absalom and his brother Amnon was particularly significant. Amnon was David's eldest son and heir, which put him in direct conflict with Absalom. It's not hard to imagine the jealousy and rivalry that would arise in such a situation. While Absalom was admired for being the most handsome man in the Bible, Amnon had the advantage of being first in line for the throne. This created an imbalance of power that would later lead to tragic consequences for the family. Sibling rivalry is something many can relate to, but in the case of Absalom and Amnon, it went beyond the usual squabbles. The tension between them was amplified by their positions within the family and the kingdom. Absalom may have had beauty, but Amnon had authority, and this dynamic created a breeding ground for resentment. Like many families today, where siblings compete for attention, resources, or approval, Absalom's family was no different, except that their conflicts would play out on a much larger stage. Maacah, Absalom's mother, added another layer of complexity to the family dynamics. As a foreign princess, she brought with her a different set of values and cultural expectations. This made Absalom stand out even more within the family. He wasn't just the most handsome man in the Bible. He was also a symbol of David's political alliances. However, this dual identity also created a sense of distance between him and his siblings, who may not have viewed him as one of their own. Absalom's relationship with his father, King David, was also strained. David was a man of great accomplishments, but he was not without his flaws. His relationships with his children were often complicated, and Absalom was no exception. While David may have admired Absalom's beauty, their relationship was marred by the events that would unfold later in their lives. It's a reminder that even the most beautiful family can be torn apart by unresolved conflicts. In many ways, Absalom's family dynamics are a reflection of the challenges that many people face today. Families are rarely perfect, and the more complex the family, the more difficult it can be to navigate relationships. Absalom's beauty may have made him stand out, but it didn't exempt him from the same struggles that many families experience: conflict, jealousy, and misunderstanding. His story shows that even in the Bible, families dealt with the same issues we see today. The conflict between Absalom and Amnon was not just a personal issue. It had implications for the entire kingdom. As sons of the king, their actions had political ramifications. Absalom's beauty may have made him a beloved figure, but it also made his actions more visible. When family conflicts play out on a public stage, the stakes are much higher. Absalom's story reminds us that even the most personal disputes can have far-reaching consequences when they involve people in positions of power. The tensions in David's family weren't limited to Absalom and Amnon. With multiple wives and children, the royal household was a breeding ground for conflict. Absalom's beauty and noble heritage only added to the complexity of the situation. It's easy to imagine how a family with so many competing interests could become a source of division. As the most handsome man in the Bible, Absalom may have appeared to have it all, but behind the scenes, his family life was anything but harmonious. Absalom's story highlights the impact of unresolved family conflict. His relationship with his siblings, especially Amnon, would eventually lead to tragic consequences. It's a powerful reminder that beauty, status, and power don't shield anyone from the difficulties of family life. Absalom may have been admired for his looks, but his family relationships were far from picture perfect. His beauty could draw people in, but it couldn't fix the broken relationships within his family. As we continue to explore Absalom's life, it becomes clear that his family was a major influence on his actions. His beauty may have been his most visible trait, but his relationships with his siblings and his father shaped his decisions. It's a reminder that no matter how perfect someone may appear, their family history plays a significant role in who they become. Absalom's rebellion, which we will explore in the next chapter, was a direct result of the conflicts he faced at home. Absalom's complex family dynamic set the stage for the events that would follow. His beauty may have made him beloved by the people, but it also placed him in the center of family conflicts that would ultimately lead to his downfall. The tensions between him, Amnon, and his father were not just personal, they had implications for the entire kingdom. Absalom's story shows that even the most handsome man in the Bible couldn't escape the consequences of family strife. It's interesting to think about how Absalom's beauty both helped and hindered him within his family. On one hand, it made him stand out, but on the other, it created expectations that he struggled to meet. In many ways, Absalom's story is a reflection of the pressures that come with being in the public eye. While he may have been the most handsome man in the Bible, his family dynamics were far more complicated than they appeared on the surface. As we move into the next chapter of Absalom's life, it's important to remember that his beauty, while significant, was only one part of his story. His family relationships played a major role in shaping his decisions, and the conflicts he faced at home would eventually lead to his rebellion. Absalom's story is a reminder that no matter how perfect someone may seem, the pressures of family and power can lead to tragic outcomes. The tragedy that befell Tamar was one of the darkest moments in Absalom's life. Tamar, Absalom's sister, was a beautiful and innocent woman, but her life was shattered when Amnon, their half-brother, committed a terrible crime against her. This act of betrayal within the family was not only devastating to Tamar but deeply affected Absalom as well. He was furious, not just because of the act itself, but because it came from within their own family, adding a layer of shame and outrage. This moment would shape much of what would follow in Absalom's life. Absalom's love for his sister was evident in how he cared for her after the tragedy. He took Tamar into his home, protecting her as best as he could. However, his heart burned with anger and a desire for justice. But rather than acting impulsively, Absalom waited. For 2 years, he kept his rage hidden, planning his revenge on Amnon for the crime he committed. Absalom's beauty may have been admired by many, but beneath that exterior, a storm was brewing. This family tragedy highlights the devastating effects of unresolved conflicts and injustice. For many, the natural reaction to a wrong is immediate action, but Absalom took a different approach. His patience in waiting for the right moment to exact revenge is a reflection of his calculated nature. But while this may seem like a lesson in patience, it's also a warning about the dangers of letting anger fester for too long. Absalom's beauty couldn't hide the darkness that was growing inside him. The banquet where Absalom finally took his revenge was meant to appear as a peaceful family gathering. On the surface, everything seemed fine, just as Absalom himself appeared calm and collected. But beneath that calm exterior, there was a deep-seated desire for retribution. When the moment came, Absalom ordered his servants to kill Amnon, fulfilling the revenge he had been planning for years. It's a powerful reminder that outward appearances can be deceiving, and even the most handsome man in the Bible can be capable of such calculated violence. Absalom's revenge wasn't just an act of personal justice, it was a statement to his family and to the kingdom. By killing Amnon, Absalom sought to restore honor to Tamar and to himself. In many ways, it was an act that mirrored the code of justice in the ancient world, where wrongs were often repaid with equal force. However, this act of vengeance didn't bring peace to Absalom's heart. In fact, it set him on a path of further conflict with his father, King David. After killing Amnon, Absalom fled to Geshur, where he would spend the next 3 years in exile. Despite his beauty and charm, Absalom couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. It's a reminder that no matter how admired or popular someone may be, actions have consequences. Absalom's decision to take justice into his own hands led to a rift between him and his father that would never fully heal. His beauty may have opened doors for him, but it couldn't fix the brokenness that followed his act of revenge. During his time in exile, Absalom's thoughts must have been consumed by what had happened. It's easy to imagine him reflecting on the events that led him there, his sister's tragedy, his own anger, and the consequences of his actions. But rather than feeling remorse, Absalom's heart grew harder. His time in exile only fueled his desire to return to power and claim what he believed was rightfully his. It's a reminder that unresolved anger can lead to even greater destruction. Absalom's story is one of contrasts. On one hand, he was the most handsome man in the Bible, admired by many for his appearance and charm. But on the other hand, he was a man driven by anger, revenge, and ambition. His decision to kill Amnon may have brought him temporary satisfaction, but it didn't resolve the underlying issues in his family. In fact, It only deepened the divisions and set the stage for the rebellion that would come next. The tragedy of Tamar and Absalom's revenge is a powerful reminder of the impact of family trauma. When conflicts within a family are left unresolved, they can spiral out of control, leading to devastating consequences. Absalom's beauty may have made him a beloved figure in the kingdom, but it couldn't protect him from the consequences of his actions. His desire for justice, while understandable, ultimately led to more pain and suffering for his family. For Tamar, the tragedy wasn't just a personal loss, it was a public humiliation. As a woman in ancient Israel, her value was tied to her purity, and Amnon's crime against her destroyed that. Absalom's revenge may have been an attempt to restore her honor, but it couldn't erase the trauma she had experienced. Tamar's story is a reminder that even in the most powerful families, women were often vulnerable to the actions of men. Absalom's beauty may have made him a protector, but even he couldn't undo what had been done. Absalom's decision to wait 2 years before taking revenge is both fascinating and troubling. It shows a level of patience and calculation that is rare, but it also reveals how deeply his anger had taken root. Many people today can relate to the feeling of wanting justice after being wronged, but Absalom's story shows the dangers of letting that desire for revenge consume you. His beauty may have been his most outwardly visible trait, but it was his inner turmoil that truly defined him. It's easy to see how Absalom's beauty could make people forget the darker side of his personality. After all, the most handsome man in the Bible surely couldn't be capable of such violence, right? But as we've seen, outward appearances can be deceiving. Absalom's good looks may have made him popular, but they didn't prevent him from making choices that would lead to his downfall. It's a reminder that beauty is only skin deep, and true character is revealed through one's actions. Absalom's revenge wasn't just about avenging Tamar, it was also about asserting his own power within the family. By killing Amnon, Absalom positioned himself as a force to be reckoned with. He may have been the most handsome man in the Bible, but he was also one of the most ambitious. His beauty gave him influence, but it was his willingness to take action, even violent action, that set him apart. However, this ambition would eventually lead to his undoing. The events that followed Tamar's tragedy and Absalom's revenge are a reflection of how unresolved conflicts can tear families apart. Absalom's beauty may have made him stand out, but it was his actions that truly defined his legacy. His decision to take justice into his own hands, while understandable, only led to further division within his family. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes, seeking revenge only leads to more pain. As we continue Absalom's story, we'll see how his desire for power and revenge would eventually lead to open rebellion against his father, King David. His beauty may have made him a beloved figure in the kingdom, but it couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. The next chapter in Absalom's life will show how his ambition and desire for revenge would ultimately lead to his downfall. Absalom's rebellion against his father, King David, was not a sudden decision. It was the result of years of growing resentment and ambition. After avenging Tamar and spending years in exile, Absalom returned to Jerusalem, but the relationship between him and David was never the same. His time away had only fueled his desire for power, and soon Absalom began to plot his rebellion. His beauty and charm helped him win over the hearts of many Israelites, but his ambition was far more dangerous than anyone realized. Absalom knew that if he wanted to take the throne from David, he needed the support of the people. Using his charisma and charm, he began to position himself as a man of the people. He would stand at the city gate, listening to the grievances of the Israelites, and promising them justice if he were king. His beauty and natural ability to connect with people made it easy for him to gain their trust. Slowly but surely, Absalom was building a following, all while appearing to be a loyal son. It's fascinating to see how Absalom used his beauty and charm as political tools. In today's world, we often see politicians and leaders who win support through their charisma, and Absalom was no different. He knew how to present himself in a way that made people believe he was the solution to their problems. His appearance played a huge role in his success, but it was his ability to manipulate the emotions of the people that truly set him apart. Absalom may have been the most handsome man in the Bible, but his ambition ran much deeper than his appearance. As Absalom's popularity grew, so did his confidence. He knew that the time had come to make his move against his father. With a group of loyal followers by his side, Absalom declared himself king in Hebron. This was a bold and dangerous move. But Absalom believed he had the support he needed to challenge David's reign. It's interesting to think about how someone so admired for their beauty could also be so ruthless in their ambition. Absalom's rebellion wasn't just about power. It was about proving that he could outshine his father. The decision to rebel against David was not without its risks. David was a seasoned warrior and a beloved king, and many people remained loyal to him. However, Absalom's beauty and charm had won over a significant portion of the population, and he believed that he could take the throne by force. His rebellion was a calculated gamble, one that he was willing to take despite the potential consequences. It's a reminder that even the most admired figures can be driven by dangerous ambitions. Absalom's rebellion wasn't just a personal conflict between him and his father. It had far-reaching implications for the entire kingdom. His actions divided the people of Israel, forcing them to choose between their loyalty to David and their admiration for Absalom. In many ways, it was a battle between the old guard and the new. Absalom's beauty may have made him a symbol of youthful energy and change, but his rebellion was a direct challenge to the established order. This division would have lasting effects on the kingdom. As Absalom's rebellion gained momentum, David was forced to flee Jerusalem. It's hard to imagine the pain that David must have felt. Not just as a king, but as a father. The son he had once admired for his beauty and potential was now leading a rebellion against him. For Absalom, this was the culmination of years of resentment and ambition. His beauty had opened many doors for him, but now, he was using his influence to try and take the throne by force. The conflict between Absalom and David is a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Absalom's beauty and charm may have made him a beloved figure, but it also made him overconfident. He believed that his popularity and good looks would be enough to win him the throne. However, as we'll see, beauty alone is not enough to secure power. Absalom's rebellion was doomed to fail, not because he lacked support, but because he underestimated the strength of his father's loyalty and experience. Absalom's rebellion was marked by a series of strategic moves, each designed to weaken David's position. He took control of key cities and won the support of influential figures in the kingdom. His beauty and charm continued to play a role in his success, as people were drawn to him not just for his vision but for the image he projected. However, as his rebellion grew, so did the tension within his own ranks. The very qualities that had made him popular were now causing jealousy and division among his followers. As the battle between David's forces and Absalom's rebellion loomed, it became clear that Absalom's beauty and charm could only take him so far. He had built his rebellion on the foundation of popularity, but popularity is fickle. The loyalty of David's men, combined with David's experience as a warrior, would prove to be a formidable challenge for Absalom. It's a reminder that true leadership requires more than just charm. It requires wisdom, experience, and the ability to unite people behind a common cause. Absalom's rebellion reached its climax on the battlefield, where his forces clashed with David's loyal soldiers. Despite his beauty and charisma, Absalom was no match for the seasoned warriors who fought for his father. In the chaos of battle, Absalom's long hair, which had once been a symbol of his beauty, became his downfall. As he fled on horseback, his hair became tangled in a tree, leaving him helpless and vulnerable. It's a tragic irony that the very thing that made him stand out also led to his demise. As Absalom hung helplessly from the tree, he must have realized the full weight of his rebellion. His beauty and charm had carried him far, but they couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. In that moment, Absalom's story became one of missed potential. He had the looks, the charisma, and the support of the people, but his ambition had blinded him to the reality of his situation. His rebellion had brought him to the brink of power, but it was his own arrogance that ultimately led to his downfall. David's men found Absalom hanging from the tree, and despite orders to capture him alive, they killed him. The death of Absalom was a devastating blow to David, not just as a king, but as a father. Absalom may have been the most handsome man in the Bible, but his beauty couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. David's grief was overwhelming as he realized that the conflict between them had cost him his son. It's a powerful reminder that even the most beautiful and admired figures are not immune to tragedy. Absalom's rebellion is a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition and the limits of beauty. He may have been admired for his looks, but in the end, it was his actions that defined his legacy. His beauty gave him influence, but it was his ambition that drove him to rebel against his father. Absalom's story shows that while beauty can open doors, it cannot replace wisdom, humility, or the strength of character needed to lead. His rebellion may have been bold, but it was ultimately doomed to fail. As we reflect on Absalom's rebellion, it's clear that his story is one of contrasts. He was the most handsome man in the Bible, but his beauty couldn't save him from his own ambition. His charm and charisma made him a beloved figure, but his actions alienated him from the very people who loved him. Absalom's rebellion may have been driven by a desire for power, but it was also fueled by a deeper sense of resentment and anger. His beauty may have made him stand out, but it was his choices that defined his fate. Absalom's story is far from over. While his rebellion may have ended in tragedy, the impact of his actions would be felt for years to come. His death left a lasting scar on David, both as a father and as a king. As we move into the final chapter of Absalom's life, we'll see how David grapples with the grief of losing his son and the consequences of the choices they both made. Absalom's beauty may have made him unforgettable, but it was his rebellion that truly shaped his legacy. Absalom's downfall came swiftly and tragically. Despite all his beauty and charm, his rebellion against his father, King David, had set him on a path of destruction. The moment his long hair got caught in the branches of that tree during the battle was a turning point. It was almost poetic. The very feature that made him stand out, the one people admired, became the reason for his downfall. Absalom's beauty couldn't save him from the consequences of his ambition. David's instructions to his men were clear. He wanted Absalom to be captured alive. Despite the rebellion, David's love for his son had not faded, but fate had other plans. Absalom's tangled hair left him hanging, helpless, in the heat of battle. When David's soldiers found him, they defied their king's orders and killed him. It was a moment that sealed the tragic end of Absalom's rebellion, leaving a wound that would never heal in David's heart. For David, Absalom's death was more than just the loss of a rebellious son. It was the loss of potential. Absalom had once been seen as a possible heir, a young man with beauty, charisma, and influence, but his choices had led him down a path of destruction. David's grief was overwhelming, and he wept bitterly for his son. In that moment, the roles of king and father blurred, and David's sorrow revealed the depth of his love for Absalom. Despite everything that had happened, David's famous cry, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you," captures the intensity of his grief. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how much power or status one holds, the pain of losing a child is universal. David's heartbreak was not just about the loss of his son. It was about the realization that his own actions and failures had played a part in Absalom's tragic fate. The king who had once been so powerful was now a grieving father, consumed by regret. Absalom's beauty had made him a beloved figure in Israel, but his ambition had made him an enemy of his own father. His rebellion had divided the kingdom and led to bloodshed, but in the end, it was his own vanity that contributed to his downfall. The image of Absalom hanging helplessly from a tree is a stark reminder of the fleeting nature of beauty and power. Even the most admired and handsome man in the Bible couldn't escape the consequences of his choices. The relationship between David and Absalom had always been complicated. David had admired his son's beauty and potential, but their relationship was marred by unresolved conflicts and unspoken tensions. Absalom's rebellion was the culmination of years of resentment and ambition, and his death was the tragic conclusion to their strained relationship. For David, Absalom's death was a reminder of the mistakes he had made as a father. His grief was not just for the son he lost, but for the relationship that had been broken long before the rebellion began. David's reaction to Absalom's death was not what his men expected. After all, Absalom had led a rebellion against him, and his death meant the end of the conflict. But David couldn't separate his role as king from his role as a father. His grief was so intense that it overshadowed the victory his men had achieved. It's a powerful reminder that family bonds, even in the most complicated of circumstances, run deeper than any political conflict. David's heartbreak revealed the depth of his love for Absalom. Even after all that had happened, the image of Absalom's lifeless body, once admired for its beauty, now broken and defeated, is a haunting one. His long hair, which had once been a symbol of his beauty and strength, now symbolized his downfall. In many ways, Absalom's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of vanity and ambition. His beauty had opened doors for him, but it had also blinded him to the consequences of his actions. His downfall was a reminder that beauty alone is not enough to secure success or happiness. As David mourned the loss of his son, he was forced to confront the role he had played in Absalom's fate. His own actions as a father and a king had contributed to the division within his family. Absalom's rebellion didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the result of years of unresolved conflict and tension. David's grief was not just for the loss of Absalom, but for the loss of the relationship they could have had. It's a reminder that family conflicts, if left unresolved, can have tragic consequences. Absalom's death marked the end of his rebellion, but the scars it left on David and the kingdom would last for years. The beauty and charm that had once made Absalom a beloved figure were now part of a tragic legacy. His ambition had led to his downfall, and his rebellion had cost the lives of many. But for David, the cost was even greater. It was the loss of a son, the loss of hope, and the realization that he could never undo what had been done. The story of Absalom's rebellion and downfall is one of missed potential. He had the looks, the charisma, and the influence to be a great leader, but his ambition and desire for revenge led him down a path of destruction. His beauty may have made him the most handsome man in the Bible, but it was his choices that defined his legacy. In the end, Absalom's story is a reminder that beauty is fleeting, and that true success comes from wisdom, humility, and integrity. David's grief for Absalom wasn't just about the loss of a son. It was about the loss of what could have been. Absalom had once been seen as a potential heir, a young man with the promise of greatness. But his rebellion had shattered that potential, and his death marked the end of any hope for reconciliation. David's tears were not just for the son he had lost, but for the future that had been taken from him. It's a powerful reminder that our choices, even those made in anger, can have far-reaching consequences. As David mourned Absalom, the kingdom began to recover from the rebellion. The people who had once admired Absalom for his beauty and charisma now saw him as a tragic figure, a man whose ambition had led to his downfall. Absalom's death left a lasting impact on the kingdom, and his story became a cautionary tale for future generations. Even the most handsome man in the Bible couldn't escape the consequences of his actions, and his legacy was forever marked by the rebellion he had led. Absalom's downfall was a reminder that beauty, while powerful, is not enough to guarantee success. His charm and good looks had won him the admiration of the people, but they couldn't save him from his own ambition. His story is a reflection of the dangers of letting external appearances dictate one's sense of worth. Absalom's beauty may have made him a beloved figure, but it was his choices that ultimately defined him. His rebellion was a lesson in the limits of beauty and the importance of humility. David's grief for Absalom was a turning point in his life. The king who had once been so powerful and admired was now a broken man, consumed by sorrow. Absalom's death had forced David to confront the mistakes he had made as a father and a king. It's a reminder that no matter how much power or status one holds, the pain of losing a child is universal. David's grief was a powerful expression of the love he had for Absalom, despite everything that had happened. As we reflect on the downfall of Absalom, it's clear that his story is one of contrasts. He was the most handsome man in the Bible, but his beauty couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. His rebellion had divided the kingdom and torn his family apart, and his death had left a lasting scar on David. Absalom's story is a reminder that true greatness comes not from external appearances, but from the choices we make and the relationships we build. His beauty may have been admired, but it was his ambition that defined his legacy. Absalom's story isn't just a tale from the past. It's a powerful reminder of how unchecked ambition and unresolved conflicts can destroy even the brightest futures. What's holding you back today? Is there something you're hiding behind? A facade, a mask? Just like Absalom's beauty. Maybe it's time to reflect on the choices you're making and the relationships you've neglected. Ask yourself, are you letting pride, anger, or ambition drive your decisions? It's easy to get swept up in appearances, but true strength comes from within. If this story has made you question the direction of your life, then now's the time to change. Don't wait until it's too late. Make the decision to seek wisdom and growth, just like King David tried to with his son. And before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Let's continue this journey together, learning from the Bible's most complex characters and uncovering the lessons that can transform your life.